Well, I came into a situation where the students had been working with other university professors and mentors and students during the year on different subjects that were very diverse, such as aesthetics and engineering. So the students were used to having very maybe unusual content to deal with in this after school program that I became a part of for 7 weeks. And so when dance was the announced subject and embodied learning was the goal, they seemed to absolutely accept it as yet another perhaps esoteric subject that they hadn't had a chance to learn from, learn about. So we ventured in to start the unit with a lot of dance technique and teaching them the different kinds of warm-ups and stretches that you would need to do just to be safe. And then we started getting very creative with how shapes could express an image, and then we started turning the shapes into movement sequences and how they could show in a certain dynamic, a certain emotion. And then I introduced some work by very famous Latin American poets who represented different nations that speak Spanish, and we started marrying these two things together, and we started discussing the poems and seeing how some of what we had made up already would fit certain moments or certain words, and that was the beginning. Many of them have had folklorico dance, and many of them come from a family that has celebrated things using that style of dance and celebrated their culture in that way. A couple of them had done hip hop informally, but none of them had had what we might call creative movement or really had a chance to choreograph anything. So we worked with authentic movement and a movement that originated out of the poetry and the images, and made sure that they weren't actually drawing on any moves they had ever done before. So we had this goal of being highly inventive, highly original, not trying to copy anyone else's work, and they hadn't seen a lot of other modern dance or contemporary dance, so it was pretty easy not to copy.
Wow.
And they just listened to the words, and then they would sort of tell me what they thought it was about, and then I would create a sequence for them, and then they would try to do it. Well, it was great working with Mauricio Salgado from New York City, who I know from his work after graduating at Juilliard. He's a really great actor and just a galvanizer of community. He knows how to develop an ensemble. He has a lot of great tactics, and he's a native Spanish speaker. So my project was predicated on the fact that it was completely bilingual. So it made sense that the teaching team was bilingual and represented both cultures, multiple cultures. And working with Mauricio was wonderful because we started out with just a sketch of what 3 dances the children had already choreographed to, the 3 poems, and then he had an autobiographical story he wanted to tell, and I asked him if he could work these 3 poems into 3 different moments in his life so that they would become illustrative examples of 3 things that he had gone through. And he figured out a way to do that, and he spent about 36 hours hammering out a script, memorizing it, and then translating it so it could be performed in 2 languages. So the dances ended up being illustrative and a component of a very long story, which was his autobiography. Another issue that's addressed in terms of social justice would be the use of the participants' native language as a key part of the process, as a key part of the learning process, as the intellectual artifacts that we brought into the project were in Spanish, not necessarily from the same countries of origin as the families of the children, but representing Argentina and Chile and Mexico, that to me was an issue of social justice because it's opening up and globalizing the content that's brought to them in their school, and it's avoiding some of the dominant discourse in school, which often doesn't represent Central or Latin America at all in terms of its work products. So the students became familiar with these three poets. They memorized the words in English and Spanish, and to me that's a social justice issue, that they can speak beautiful poetry, beautiful works of art in the native language, and that's considered, I think the project showed, demonstrated how valuable that is.
Yes, I would begin by defining success with commitment from the students, commitment from the school and from the parents, which comes from what they see in the children, the changes that they see coming from the children. I would also define it by the changes that they see in the teachers. How are the teachers also learning from the children in light of the work that they're doing together? Because the arts are a collaborative process. It's not about teachers dictating terms, but it is a joint learning process. And so the commitment comes from all of the parties who are involved: parent, child, teacher, administrator, seeing the change happening in everybody and wanting to continue returning to that space.
There was a real strong welcome from Washington School with the principal's generous offer to have this here. There was a support from the National Endowment for the Arts grant, of course, which underwrote it, and Arts for Social Justice through SCU Presents at Santa Clara University. And another unit at Santa Clara University, the Ignatian Center's Thriving Neighbors Initiative, also had a whole force of teaching students and mentors here to help the program come to fruition. The parents were on board, the families were happy to see it was happening, and the two artists that got to come into that were very lucky and we're very grateful for that atmosphere of collaboration.